All right, good morning. Welcome to our fourth session within the 7-session series of Striving to Thriving with We Thrive.live with the support of IWL, Integrating Women Leaders. A few announcements to start as we get things rolling this morning. You can check out the recording from last week, Writing Your Thrive Story with Rebecca Fleetwood-Hession on her YouTube channel within the Salesforce Women's Network playlist that she's created for us for this entire series. And for the Salesforce employees, you can find the recording and all of the information regarding this series on our Women's Network Indie Chatter page. So on the Salesforce side, you have myself, Kylie Carnes. I am your Lean In Circles chair for Women's Network here in Indy, as well as our Women's Network president, Kelsey Jones, is here as well, who sits on the board for IWL. So we'll be keeping an eye out for any questions, comments that come in on the chat window. We've had amazing interaction thus far. Please continue. It's been a blast. We also have Alex Perry, a highly acclaimed motivational speaker and creator of Practically Speaking, and now an author of the Mini Mogul. She'll be discussing the importance of communication and confidence. And last but certainly not least, representing IWL today, we have Julie, who is an IWL board member involved in the Roche's Women's Leadership Team and an HR leader for Roche Diabetes Care. So Julie, I will now kick it over to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's my pleasure to join you all today. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I actually saw a couple of my Roche colleagues dialing in. So hello to you all, as well as everybody else on the call. So as we talk about communication and confidence in this series, one of the things that I thought we could frame the discussion with is really a challenge that many of us may face. I know I have myself. And this could be a feeling of phoniness, being a fraud, despite high achievement. And sometimes that creates some anxiety. Sometimes we might think we've got an opportunity by chance. And we may have, fears of failure or overestimating others and underestimating ourselves. So as we start this session, I'm curious if you could share in chat just to get some engagement from you all. What do we call this? You can just type it in. Those of you that, yep, there you go. Imposter syndrome, which I figure most of us are familiar with and have experienced. So what percentage of women do you think experience this? Can you also share in the chat? $78, $75, $75, $100, $80. Yeah, all very good. I think what our understanding is that it's about 70%, but of course that can go up and down. We probably all experienced this at some time. I know I have, even recently in my career. I was with a company for 18 years before joining Roche about 1.5 years ago. And it was a big step for me. And within 6 months of my role as a senior director, there were some discussions that started about me taking on a broader regional role with a vice president title. And I couldn't believe it. And a few months later, I became a vice president of HR. And there's times where I don't know if I feel like a vice president because I still want to be myself. And then there's times where I say, gosh, am I really ready to be a vice president and everything that carries? And so I've had to take that nasty negative voice in my mind and set it aside and say, I got this. And it's been an interesting experience. Maybe we can go to the next slide, Kylie. So interestingly enough, you see here on the right that an Academy Award winner, Viola Davis, has actually struggled with this herself. So someone that is so darn accomplished, beautiful, talented, experiences this, which basically means we all experience it. And this was a topic that we've talked about within IWL and different forums, and even the Indy conference last year. But there's ways to overcome this. And you'll hear a little bit about that more when we turn it over to Alex. But the first thing really is to kind of grab and stop the negative self-talk that creates this inner anxiety that is not healthy. And many times, like if you actually think about the self-talk and you take a step away from it or talk to other people how they view you, it's like nonsense. It's not even relevant. It's almost like it's a fraud that you're making up in your own head, right? But it's really important that we own it and we recognize it, and don't allow people to come in and second guess you, and also try not to overestimate others versus and underestimate yourself. And this sometimes can happen when we think about considering ourselves for different opportunities, and we say, oh, we need to have this, and this experience in order to go for a job. And that might be different for a man who might say, I've got 2 of those and I'm going to go for it, and is very confident. And then the other thing is really important is to have your tribe, or have a few people that you trust that really lift you up and can check you on that negative self-talk. And this is advice that we've gotten from women of all ages. So the good news is that this can change over time in a better way. This is some research that was done by 2 professors at IU, and you can see that women can actually surpass men over time, but it takes longer. And so we really need to build each other up, and through experiences and some of the other things that I shared, as well as you'll hear later, we can change this trajectory. And yeah, so that is my brief intro. But I think what is interesting about this topic is, so much of imposter syndrome is really tied to our communication and how we talk to ourselves, and how that actually impacts how we communicate with other people. And so with that, I will turn it over to Alex.
And Alex, I'm going to get your video started here. Just bear with me.
What would you say today if you knew that tomorrow you would never speak again? For over 2 decades, I worked with people who lost or never had the ability to say what they wanted, say what they needed to say. I worked with people who could not speak. People like Taylor, who suffered a traumatic brain injury after a car accident. People like Ruby, who had a stroke and just wanted to be able to say her grandkids' names. What I realized is that no one should have to wait for a tragic experience to say what they need to say. Have you ever not spoken up because you think you have nothing to say? Have you ever been passed over for a promotion at work because you were afraid to speak up? Have you missed out by not asking for what you want? I can help. And I have to warn you, this work isn't meant to be easy. It's supposed to be a challenge. You'll have to try hard. You'll have to push hard. You'll have to dig deep to find your story. And you may fail. But if you want it bad enough, you'll get back up and you'll try again and again and again. And I'll be there to support you each step of the way. Why? Because I believe you can show up. You can speak up. You can tell your story. I believe you are capable of so much more. This is more than a job for me. I do this work to honor every single person I met who never got the chance to say everything they needed and wanted to say. It's my you where you go. Job to help your space. It's my job to help you find your story. It's my job to help you change the way you use the most powerful gift you've ever been given so you can do more, be more, and get more of what you want in life. Our greatest power lies in our ability to speak. You owe it to the world to say what you need to say. And more importantly, I believe you owe it to yourself.
So I've never introduced myself before like that. That's this is probably a once in a lifetime opportunity that happened just based on actually what was an email that I sent to Kylie, and she's like, "Oh, I got your video too." She's like, "You want me to use that?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Maybe we should use that video." So we did, and that's me, and that's why I do the work that I do. And in full transparency, I'll be the first to tell you that I can't tell you how many takes that video took. And I'm reading from a teleprompter, and all of the things that make that sound as flashy and whatever as it feels. And I like that. It feels really cool. It's a cool video, and there's still a typo in it. So what you need to know about me right up front is that I speak typo. I speak very quickly, and sometimes I get things wrong. And so as we go throughout this, if for some reason I make a typo or say a typo or you miss something, by all means, just drop it in the chat and let me know, because Lord knows it takes a village to help all of us be the best kind of communicators that we want to be and be the most confident communicators that we want to be. So I'll have Kylie move to my first slide. And as we get started, I want to remind you of something, because I don't think we hear this enough, especially as women, but that you already have everything that you need to be an exceptional communicator. You were born to talk. You've been talking your whole life. And I find it both interesting and tragic that we make it as complicated as it is, and we make it as nerve-wracking as it is. And the imposter syndrome that comes from being like the struggles with communication, it's real. And I will tell you firsthand, I experience it. That I have never started a talk, never done a talk, never been in front of an audience where I haven't felt nervous. That's not a thing. It's not something that people say, "Oh, I'm never nervous." I'm like, "What is that like? Come tell me." My hands sweat, my heart shakes, my hands shake, my heart beats fast. I think that's how that works. Can your heart shake? Does anybody know? I don't know if that's a thing. But But I want to remind you that you have been speaking your whole life. You have everything that you need to be an exceptional communicator. And today I want to touch on just a few things that I think will really help you along the way. So the three things that I'm going to cover with you today are: number one, listening to yourself first. Number two, that clear is kind. And number three, that perfection breaks connection every single time. If you don't remember anything else that I say, please remember that one. But those are the things that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to encourage you to participate. I'm going to encourage you to ask questions along the way. And hopefully you'll walk out of this time together feeling a little more inspired, a little more encouraged, and just a little bit braver to communicate the way that you really want to communicate every day at work and at home, with your loved ones, with your friends. To me, communication is universal, and it happens across all domains. So the way you're talking at home is the way you're talking at work, and the way you're talking with your friends. Yes, it may change, but if you're going to be confident, the universals hold true. And these are a few of the universals that I want to talk about today. So let's start with listening. And I got to say, I've spent my entire career in communication. I teach people to talk. And I find it fascinating that in many communication courses and in many public speaking classes and webinars and information things, when we start with communication, we start with what are we going to say? And we don't necessarily start with how are we going to listen? And so I want to talk about listening, and I want to talk about listening to ourselves first, and then we can talk about a little bit about listening to our audience or listening to the people that surround us. I pulled this quote from Rebecca's session last week, which is, I say terrible things that I would never say to another human being. If y'all can relate to this, would you just pop that in the chat box? Like, give me a quick yes or hands up or some weird emoji that I can tell. Who can relate to this statement? Allie says, indeed, yes. I love it when people spell yes with the A's. Thanks, Jessica. Right? Yes, for sure. Claire, yes. Sometimes, yep. Yep. Oh, man. The thing. Oh, Kelly says, oh, yeah. Yes, girl. Like Vicky heard me with the like spell yes. I can barely say that, but it's fun. But listening to ourselves. I want to ask you this question. When was the last time that you sat, and I mean really sat and listened to yourself? And I'm going to give you two scenarios. Number one, sat in complete silence, not journaling, not checking something off your to-do list, not completing yet another reflection exercise, which are great. They're great. I'm not dogging on the reflection exercises, but when was the last time you really sat and listened to the thoughts that are running through your head? When was the last time you did that? Ooh, is it Kalpana? Am I saying your name right? If I'm butchering your name, please understand it's not on purpose.
Yes, that's right. Kalpana.
Okay. Thank you. All the time. So you're listening to yourself all the time. That's beautiful. When you're trying to sleep, Terry, for sure. Kelly, rarely. Before taking an extra day off for myself this past Tuesday, oh man, Kylie can't even say when the last time. Kelsey was up at 3 a.m. listening to her thoughts. Ditto. Oh man, too busy talking to your kids, thinking more about the to-do list, but not listening to what you're really willing to tell yourself. So I always equate it to, I'm thinking about the to-do list, but the underlying theme, the little voice, or if you were in last week's session, the little bitch in your head that is talking to you underneath that to-do list is, I don't have enough time. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to make it. If I don't do this, people are going to think I suck. People are like, right? So listening to the undercurrent of the voice, after listening to everyone all day, over analyzing, right? So listening to other people, we can talk a little bit about that here in a second, who to listen to and who not to listen to. You can't listen to everybody. Oh my gosh, yes. So I want to encourage you as we go through this process to really make sure that you're carving some time and really thinking about, what is it that I'm saying? What is it that I'm saying out loud? What is it that I'm saying to myself? Are those words that I would say to other people? Are those words that sound confident and competent? Or am I spending the vast majority of my time dogging myself? And so I find that particularly interesting, because I think that for many of us, it's a real battle and it's a real struggle to transition from that into like using positive self-talk and positive words and things like that. But I want to draw your attention to a couple of things about listening to yourself. The way that you talk to yourself in your head will bleed out into how you talk to other people, and most specifically about yourself. So this looks like, and I'm a huge fan of self-deprecating language, and I think that there's a place for it. More often than not, I hear women self-deprecating as the general rule. So, well, I'm just not very good at that. Oh, I could never do that. Julie, I'm going to call on you just because you were the person to introduce and do all that. But this concept of, I could never be a VP. After you have something like, if I got it right, were you at your other job 17 years, 11 years?
18, yeah.
18 years. And yet you have not yet, as you look at it, you're saying to yourself, I don't really deserve this. And yet all evidence points elsewhere.
Yeah.
all evidence points elsewhere. So I really want to encourage you to listen to not only what you're saying to yourself in your head, but what are you saying out loud to other people? And I've got a couple tricks for this. So if you want to catch yourself doing it, we're all on Zoom calls all the time now where we can go back and listen to what we said and how we said it. It's a super uncomfortable thing. How many of you love to listen to yourself on audio recording? Anybody?
Nope.
Nobody. No, that got like extra O's.
It's
Not at all.
listening
Never.
or seeing yourself on video calls.
Seeing, right? So, and that starts a whole nother train of what am I saying to myself about how I look, about how I act, about my emotions. I just read an article from the Washington Post that was talking about Zoom fatigue, and part of Zoom fatigue being we are now so hyper aware of how we look and how we act that it's actually causing great fatigue because we're not focused on what's really important, which is the content or the structure of the conversation that we're having. So there's a lot. And I still encourage people to go back and listen to how you spoke when you spoke in front of other people, because you will be able to quickly identify where did I sound confident, where did I not sound confident. You'll be able to pick up on certain things. And y'all, I'm not talking about to the large extent the few ums and likes that you use from time to time. I'm not talking about whether or not you used a silly word. I'm talking about, did I represent myself well? Did I sound confident? Did I up talk and sound like I wasn't sure all the time? How did I sound, right? And I'm not making fun. If you get me around my sister, I will up talk. Up talk is contagious. If y'all don't know, does everybody know what up talk is before I kind of tangent here for a second? Up talk it's prevalent, and it's not just a women thing. There are men. I actually have worked with men in their 60s that up talk. It's pervasive in our culture, and it gives the impression that we're unsure about what we're saying. So going back and listening for those things that also are an inadvertent ding to your confidence is the thing that other people are going to pick up on. So ultimately, if we're going to be confident in how we speak, it starts with how we listen to ourselves and then how we adjust the running narrative in our head that then becomes the running narrative out of our mouth. So it would be very easy for me to say, oh yeah, I wrote a book and it's kind of good, but you probably wouldn't like it, guys. It's all right. Which feels more comfortable, right? That feels more comfortable. That feels like, be small, all the things that we know that we're socialized as women to do. And if we're going to make strides in being confident, listening to that and saying, that's not the way to say it. The way to say it is, I wrote a book. I wrote a freaking book. Are you as excited as I am about that? So before you do anything else thanks, Kylie. Before you do anything else, before you start working on I've taught this. So all the other things that impact your communication, I want you listening to yourself. What's going on in your head and what's coming out of your mouth. And when it comes out of your mouth funny, when it doesn't represent you like the way you want it to represent you, I want you to go back and fix it. So y'all, there's this thing that we don't like to do because we feel like it's gratuitous, and it's called repetition. But repetition is how we learn. It's how we develop muscle memory. And other people don't care that much. If you go back and repair a phrase when you're speaking. So if I said, oh, I wrote a book, and then I change it to, oh, I wrote a book, you're not going to care. As the listener, you're not going to care. And if you do, well, then maybe there's something else there. But anyway, but for the most part, people are not going to care about that. Go through and teach yourself the muscle memory that says, this is what I sound like when I sound confident. And I'm going to keep practicing that. And I'm going to keep practicing that. Don't wait to feel it. Because if you wait to feel it, maybe not going to happen. But practice it. Okay, I digress. Listen to yourself first. And then we can talk about being clear. And so clear as kindness. Everyone, obviously, I'm going to guess everyone knows who Brene Brown is. my future best friend, all of our future best friends. Like, I don't know how she's going to manage all of us and the relationships, but one day she will. And so if you're familiar with Brene Brown, clear is kind. So clarity, of course, starts with speaking to yourself, but it also starts with how you speak to others. And it's really simple, but it is not easy. Because one of the things that we're taught early on to do is to complicate things, to add lots of extra words, to add jargon and acronyms and lots of businessy language that makes it hard for people to understand, but makes us feel better because we're like, look at the things that I know, which is a false form of confidence. So when I know every acronym that Salesforce uses, that makes me feel really good. Right? Am I right? Like when you, is there a handbook, Kylie? Is there a Salesforce handbook of all the acronyms that you've got to memorize? So I had this at the hospital and I remember taking it on as the personal challenge. If I could learn, it's the secret decoder ring, Rebecca, for sure, of the organization. Do you know what that secret decoder ring does? What does it do? It completely makes you harder. Yeah. Makes you feel dumb if you don't know what they are. So that's a confidence crusher. It's a confidence crusher for you, and it's a confidence crusher for the people around you. Some people feel smart and others not feel smart. Ooh, it can hide the essence, right? It hides the meaning. So let me give you a really quick example since we're talking about acronyms for just a hot second. So how many of you all know what IT stands for? All right, like drop it in the chat. What does IT stand for? Information technology, infotech. And there's a question mark. Very good. So information technology, yes. It also stands for individual therapy. I come from the hospital. So if you say IT to me, my first thought goes to individual therapy. Now all of a sudden we're not communicating on the same page at all. So here's what's really interesting about IT. IT actually has 96 definitions. So if you go to Acronym Finder on the internet, so go to your internets and you look up Acronym Finder, you can look up IT. There are 96 definitions of it. What's really interesting is that it will then subcategorize based on business sector. So if you look up IT under IT, do you want to know how many definitions IT has of IT? Want to know? 36. Hey guys, way to complicate. Clear is kind. So when you're talking to yourself, when you are establishing rules and boundaries for your communication, when you are talking to other people, the more that you can simplify the language, the kinder it is. All right. So if I'm thinking about something that you might say to yourself, well, I'm just never enough. How many of you have ever uttered the words, I'm just never enough? It's just not enough. Is that a thing for some of you? Have you ever gone back and defined what enough is? Does anybody have the parameters for what your enough looks like? Changes every day, right? What is enough? Whatever it is, it's unattainable, right? Poor Vicky has set the bar so high for herself that no matter what she does, she's not going to hit that level of whatever it is, and she's going to crush her own confidence. So being clear about what you expect out of yourself on a day-to-day basis. Okay. Yes, I am enough. Yes, the bracelet that says, I am enough. Like whatever it is that you bring to the table depends on who the evaluator is, if you're being evaluated or if someone else is doing the evaluation. And man, who, not how. Man, it's tough, right? Because at the end of the day, the person who must decide whether or not you were enough is you, right? No one else truly gets to hold that power. We want to believe that other people have that power. And of course, we work in companies and structures where we're dealing with performance reviews and oh gosh, 360s and all sorts of feedback. But who really sets the bar at the end of the day for what is enough is you. So my challenge to you in this regard is for you to set some boundaries around what does that really mean? So when you are talking to yourself and you are saying to yourself, something like that, I'm not enough, I didn't meet expectations. Well, what were they to begin with? I didn't meet my own expectations. Are you really clear on what your expectations were? A quick example of that is I have a lot of speakers that I work with who will feel very disappointed after a speaking event because it didn't turn out the way that they wanted it to. And I say, well, what was the expectation? What was the end result? What was the success going to look like? Well, I wanted a standing ovation. All right. Maybe if we are really clear about what we can expect of ourselves and what we can expect of other people, we can adjust that. And then we can actually attain something that looks like confidence when we hit those measures. Because is it realistic to expect a standing ovation after a Salesforce webinar on, I don't know, pick some really techie thing that you guys talk about, right? We set ourselves up for that and we're like, why did this not go the way I wanted it to go? Well, we weren't really clear to begin with. So I want to give you one other thing on clarity in regard to how other people talk about us. And I want to share a story with you because it's really impactful. When I first got into public speaking and left healthcare and came into this role, I worked for a firm and worked under a woman, and the process was completely different. I was brand new to this. So I came from healthcare. I'm now in the corporate world. I know that I'm good at helping people speak. I know that I'm good at coaching people. I know that I can motivate, but I'm in this new role and I really want to impress my new boss. And the mentality was, practice makes perfect and perfect is the goal. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's the expectation. That's how it works in the corporate world. Then I must meet those expectations. And so I'm about 40 days in to this job, which is not like, you barely know where the bathroom is at 40 days in. Let's be honest. Your brain is so full. You're like, what shoes am I wearing? Where is the bathroom? And like, am I going to sit alone at lunch? Those are really like, you're still in that like really basic safety place. So I'm in that space, and my boss at the time, she invites me in to observe a client, and this is her unicorn client. I don't know. Have you all had bosses that have a unicorn client? Like they're like, this is the client. And the woman that we were meeting with, the way that she was described, I was intimidated like weeks before I was going to meet her because she's has this really high powered role and she travels the world and she's done all these talks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to meet her. Like, this is going to be ridiculous. I cannot wait. And so she's coming in and my boss says to me, you can come in and you can observe, but I want you to say nothing. Just watch. Okay. I can stay quiet. It may not seem like I can stay quiet, but I can totally stay quiet. So I go in, the woman comes in, I go into the office. So we had this, round conference table, and we go in and I sit it down at the table and I wait, and my boss escorts the client in, and she's just lovely. And she has an accent, which just makes her that much more cool, right? You're like, oh, you have an accent. And she's beautiful and she was very kind. And so I shook her hand, and then my boss conducted the session, and then we were getting ready to leave. And, I stayed quiet, took my notes, did my homework. And as we were getting ready to leave, the client looked at me and she said, it was very nice to meet you. And I reached out my hand And I said, "It is so nice to meet you." And I did that like, it's so nice to meet you, because when I talk, I move and things come out and I'm very expressive. So anyway, we get done. The client goes out. The door to the office closes and my boss like turns and looks at me and she says, "We need to talk." Like, okay. And I'm thinking naively at this point that she like, we're going to talk about what I saw in the session and I'm going to share everything that I learned and it's going to be amazing and wonderful. And so we go into my office and we sit down and she says to me, "How do you think that went?" And I start going on and on. I'm like, "I thought it was great. She was wonderful. And here's what I learned. And oh my gosh, this is so cool. And what do you think about this?" And she goes, "How do you think that went for you?" And I'm like, "Thought it was fine. It was good." And she looks at me and she goes, "You're just so effusive." And I thought, well, what the heck does effusive mean? And like, what is that? And I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that it wasn't good. I knew, right? Because of this in the face and all of the things. And I'm 40 days into a new job and I had taken this gigantic risk leaving healthcare and I was overwhelmed and I stood up because I was like, oh my gosh. And I started to cry. I was like, I just knew I knew I was in trouble. And so I got a Kleenex and I sat down and I like start wiping the tears away because I'm like, you can't cry. Like I'm supposed to teach professional presence. You can't cry. Like professionals don't cry. And so we sat down and she looked at me and she said, "You're really hard on yourself, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Good. We'll never have to have this conversation again." For almost 2 more years, I did everything in my power to box up, blast, like stuff down, block out effusive. I was not clear on what effusive really meant. And ironically, neither was she. So it took about 2 years. And I mean, it darn near broke my spirit. It broke who I was and how I operate and the confidence that I had in myself. It nearly destroyed it because I was trying to be something other than what I was. And I wasn't clear about what effusive meant. So it took 2 years. It took me leaving that job and it took me going, effusive. And I looked it up. And do you want to know what effusive means? Effusive is expressing feelings of gratitude in an unrestrained and heartfelt manner. And I thought, I will be damned. I will be damned. Like that is 100% me. That is how I want people to remember me when I die. I will be effusive from here on out. So the reason why I tell you this story, number one, I'm going to guess that there are many people in the room that have experienced a situation that's much similar to this. There is truth in feedback. So my boss at the time was not wrong, but the interpretation, my clarity behind it was 100% wrong. And when I got really clear on what it meant to be effusive and what that means for me, I mean, Rebecca will tell you, she's like, and that's where Alex learned to thrive, right? So that's who I am. That's how I operate. And I had to get clear on that first. So when you get some feedback, when someone calls you something, I really want you, or says something about you and how you operate, I really want you to take a look at that word. And I want you to evaluate it and get clear on whether or not that is true and whether or not it's actually a blessing in disguise, because it absolutely was for me. Yes, effusive. There's going to be at some point, I hope you all will wear them, hashtag effusive t-shirts, because dang it, I can't, like in today's world, can you imagine? I just think there can't be enough of us that have this trait. So come join me, come play along. All right. So from listening to yourself, from getting clear on what you're saying and what other people are saying to you, all the way to perfection breaks connection. And dang, right? Oh wait, oh sorry. I got distracted by it. Over the top. Keep being over the top. The view is so much better up there. Right? Yes. Over the top is another way that effusive is described. You're just so much. I'll take being so much. And yes, I do say though, and I'll say this little phrase and I'll let you just think on it because maybe it'll mean something to you and maybe it won't. But people will say that it's lonely at the top. Like they'll talk about that struggle and they've got to climb and they got to get there. And they're like, oh, it's so lonely at the top. And I'm like, then why on earth do you want to be there? Why on earth do you want to be there? Ladies, I don't know about you, but I want as many people around me. I want as many people in my minivan as I can get. Like pulling each other up, being confident in each other is what we need to be doing. And there can't be enough of us doing that for each other. So this whole lonely at the top, I don't want to be lonely at the top. I want all of you up there with me because somebody's got to help me manage this, right? I cannot do this alone. And I need all of you. So there's that side, like side turn, whatever. Took a detour. Perfection breaks connection. Y'all, I think that this is something that we need reminders of on a daily basis. The expectation for perfection. I mean, and I'm thinking about even at the beginning of this call, Julie, when we were all talking about like, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect because we like this concept of that there is a perfect that exists has been beaten into our brains for a really long time. And that there's a right answer or a wrong answer. And if we don't get it right, we're going to get a red mark on our paper, and heaven forbid that that we do that. That takes us to a place that, number one, makes us untouchable and unapproachable. And I don't know about you, but I want to be approachable. I like being likable. I want people to feel like they can come to me, and I want to be able to help. So if I can't help people, like if I come off as perfect, if I strive for perfection, people are not going to reach out to me for help. Which is why I lead with I speak typo. Because there was a long period of time where if there was an error in my speech or an error in my writing, I would do everything possible to scrub that away. Because heaven forbid that you should see that I still can't spell restaurant. Can anybody help a girl out? Thank God for technology. Dang it, why is restaurant so hard? So stupid hard. The other thing, like that perfection, it stalls you. It keeps you from being able to reach out and utilize other people's services. So, or to connect with other people. Y'all, we can't do it all. That's not possible. We have to have other people. Yeah, Grammarly is my BFF too, but I still get it wrong. I have that in my line now. I'm like, dang it. Grammarly, can't you catch everything? But we need other people to help us along the way. Especially we need other women to help us along the way, to help us figure out, to help figure everything out, to help call us on our language when it's weak, when it doesn't represent ourselves well. So one of the things that Rebecca and I do for each other quite frequently, and those of you who've been on the call, like you know that Rebecca and I have been on this together. One of the things that we do is when we see the other one doing and or saying something that is incongruent with what we know that the other one wants, which is to be seen as confident and competent and fabulous, then we call it out in each other. Lovingly, not in a mean, nasty way. Not in because let's be honest, there are people who are pointing out your typos as a way to make fun of you, right? As a way to point out your imperfections. And then there are people who will genuinely with care be like, seriously, babe, you spelled restaurant wrong again. What can I do to help? Do you want me to go over it with you 3 times? We can say it out loud together. Big freaking difference, right? Yeah. Oh, gosh. And then Suzanne says, even when people caress it, then we apologize for making a mistake. When did apologizing for being human become a thing? I think it's in school. Rebecca does this part better than I do, where she talks about like the origin of where this came from. I guess you could, like, not to go all biblical here, you could go back to Adam and Eve, like, we messed up, and now now here we are, like, coated in shame because we make mistakes. Y'all, your mistakes, your quirks, those things, people need to see those for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they need to see that you're not perfect. And number two, they need to see them so they know that it's safe to make their own, and that you're going to be there with them through that, right? That you're going to be there. There are so few mistakes in life that, in my opinion, that are unrecoverable. Typos, you mess things up with clients. We get stuff wrong, and it's not the end of the universe. I have so many friends that plan for the worst case scenario. Like, I'm the worst case scenario. Why are you programming yourself for that? Right. So then I can I can reverse engineer it, and I can show up as perfect at the beginning, so I never get to the really bad part. And I say, you're just going to mess stuff up along the way. So why not just start there and recognize that it's going to be messy and hard, and you're going to have shitty, first drafts and all of those things. Perfection breaks connection. And the words that we need as leaders, because everyone sitting on this call is a leader. So I don't care where you sit. I don't care if you're a janitor, somebody's following you. Someone's watching you. You're a leader. And the things that we most need as leaders to be able to say is, I'm sorry, when it's appropriate. We all have covered that, right? When you have made a genuine error, you need to make a genuine repair, and you're able to genuinely identify the other person's feelings. You need to say, I'm sorry, when you've actually done something that's messed with somebody else's feelings. We need to be able to say, I don't know. I don't know how many of you walk into a meeting so over-prepared that you you're like, I will have the answer to every question. And I'm like, how about you prepare for how you're going to tell them that you don't know? Let's prepare for that. Because that's not only okay, that's normal, that's appropriate. You are not Google. And even Google doesn't have all the answers. And if you want to know about that, you can read my book, because I talk about how Google does not have all the answers, because I broke Google. Dang it, I don't have time for that story, but I'll share it with you anytime you want to hear it. And then I made a mistake. Like, these are some of the most vulnerable things that you can possibly say to people that wipe away the mask of illusion and bring true connection with people. And so, again, if you remember nothing else from today, I want you to remember that perfection breaks connection. So please stop striving for something that doesn't exist and start being confident in who you are. And confidence means owning your mistakes. All right. I don't know what my next slide is, Kylie. Y'all, this is who I am. And there's lots of ways to connect with me. I do a weekly newsletter that's generally pretty fun. I'm not trying to sell you on anything. I'm usually telling you what's going on and giving you some information and hopefully some inspiration and motivation. We are also, as part of the We Thrive community in the Badass Women's Council, we host Talking with Humans every Thursday afternoon, where we tackle all sorts of topics that are related to women. And we are also hosting the Mini Mogul book club. So if you're interested in that and want to learn more about the book, you can. And then you can find me on all of the social medias except for Twitter, because Twitter freaking scares me. I have so many kudos for all of you that love Twitter, but I can't do it. I'm terrified. So I'm on there. I think I have 40 friends, but they're not really my friends because I never interact with them, and that's not friendship. So you can find me there. And then also I have the Practically Speaking podcast, where I demystify and simplify public speaking for those of us who are like, I need this to be simple and not so hard. And then the last thing I want you to walk away with today is that confidence is the continued reward for those who don't quit. And so I think this ties together everything beautifully, because we view so many things in our life as a destination, and being confident in communication is not a destination, it's a process. And you have to go through it over and over and over and over again. And you're going to hit potholes and you're going to make mistakes along the way. But it's your ability to not quit and trying to be a more confident communicator that will carry you to the place that you want to go. Y'all, I finished that with 9 minutes to go because I wanted to leave time for questions and get you out of here because I'm very acutely aware that you are bouncing from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. So I want to leave some space for questions. I'm going to read the chat because I wasn't looking at it. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Anyone have any questions or anything they wanted to call out from their comments?
Yeah. And maybe tell me what was the most impactful for you to hear today. Brandy can't do Twitter either. Thanks, Brandy, for not leaving me alone.
And while people type some things up, I just added the YouTube link to the Badass Women's Council YouTube channel, where you can find our playlist that Rebecca has created. So for those that joined maybe a few minutes late, we had talked about this in the beginning, but all the recordings from this series is going to be within the Salesforce Women's Network playlist.
Thanks, Sarah. Lots of folks tell me that they've had a similar experience with feedback, which we're going to talk about next week, which is going to be great. Thanks, Julie. Oh, what would you say if you could never speak again? And think about that from the perspective of not just what would you want to say to yourself, or not what, like we think about it from what would you say to our loved ones, but what would you want to leave yourself with? Yep, Suzanne crying at work. Yes, Terry, come sit by me. If you want to be effusive together, we'll make the room explode. I don't know if any of y'all know Brad Tunn, but he's my effusive, well, actually all of the Tunns are effusive people. So when we get together, we're like, yes. I mean, there are times, right? Maybe you don't haul effusive to a funeral, but for the most part, what I find is that women need as much confidence in being who they are as possible. Don't apologize for being human. Please and thank you. You all are beautiful humans. You have permission. Done, Rebecca. With Terry's getting all the love.
Yes.
This makes me happy.
She's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Any other questions or final thoughts? I don't want to keep you guys. And I know that Kylie's going to do a little bit of wrap up here.
Yeah, any last comments? As you can see on the screen next week, Rebecca and Alex will be back for feedback and affirmation.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, for staying on. This has been incredible.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all.